If you think about it, often the most dangerous time for us as believers is when everything's going well. We learn important things in times of adversity. We grow in our knowledge of God. Our faith is strengthened, and we often begin to build healthy disciplines of seeking God regularly. When we have nothing else, we see God more clearly. But we have a bad habit of forgetting this after we're on the other side of these difficult times. And we're not the only ones. Think back to Deuteronomy as Israel is in the wilderness. Look what God had taught them while delivering them from bondage in Egypt. Deuteronomy 8 verses 2 through 3 gives us a glimpse into this. It says, "Remember that the Lord your God led you on the entire journey these 40 years in the wilderness, so that he might humble you and test you to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. He humbled you by letting you go hungry. Then he gave you manna to eat, which you and your ancestors had not known, so that you might learn that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord." The Lord brought them through trying and painful circumstances so that they would be humbled and have their hearts purified. He led them to lean fully on himself and his provision. And when they sinned, the Lord disciplined them just as a man disciplines his son. Why did he do this? To restore them, to correct them, to prevent the same or worse from happening again, to let them see the seriousness of their sin. And we talked previously about how we need to use the time that we are in, the difficulty, to thrive in our relationship with God. We need to see our own inability, and in doing so, see his provision. We need to see our own weakness, and in doing so, see his strength. The exodus from Egypt and the journey to the promised land were designed by God to prepare Israel to live faithfully with him in the promised land by showing them these things. But, as we said, often it is easier to turn to God in the difficult times. It is in the times of prosperity, or in our case, when things go back to normal, that we forget everything that we just learned. This was the danger Israel faced, that they would become forgetful, that they would not remember their history, and in the pride of the present, that they would forget their divine deliverance, that they would no longer recall the Lord who had brought them out of slavery. And God knows this about us. He knew this about Israel. So what did he tell them? A little bit later in Deuteronomy 8, God tells them, "Be careful that you don't forget the Lord your God by failing to keep his commands, ordinances, and statutes that I am giving you today." Now pay attention to this part. He goes on to say, "When you eat and are full, and you build beautiful houses to live in, and your herds and flocks grow large, and your silver and gold multiply, and everything else you have increases. Be careful that your heart doesn't become proud, and you forget the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. You may say to yourself, 'My power and my own ability have gained this wealth for me.'" That's a sobering reminder of how quickly we forget God in the midst of prosperity. How quickly we start to feel we've done this on our own and got ourselves through the difficult time by ourselves. So here's the challenge that I want to leave you with, and a challenge I hope you take to your groups as well. See our propensity to forget God when things go well, and take active steps to prevent that from happening. Build and keep habits. Set important reminders in your life. Continue to focus on Him daily. Do whatever you have to do to ensure that the comforts, the prosperity, and everything seeming to go well does not cause you to forget all that God has done and is doing in your life. In other words, when you start traveling again, when you get your kids involved back in activities, when you start to fill your free time and distractions abound, be careful that your heart doesn't become proud and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of slavery to sin, who redeemed you in Christ.